Thank you, everybody, for joining us back here at Nubeva's channel. We're sitting here once again with Randy, and we have a lot of exciting updates to dive into. But first off,
Yes.
Randy, it's been a little bit since we've seen you. Tell us what you've been going through.
Well, about a little over a month ago, I had emergency retina surgery. And so I know some of the folks, some of the shareholders actually sent me a message. I think they found out. They thought it was cataract. This is different, next level. This is much more serious. So for those of you that are old enough, essentially it's as though a computer screen, a portion of you had a bad band on the computer screen, which doesn't happen anymore with LED screens. But back then in the old days, certainly did. And it was a really scary thing. So I literally had surgery the morning after I found this out. And so I was kind of right eye blind for quite a few weeks.
Wow.
But I'm good now. I'm good now. It's all good. And for those of you that are gross enough to not be scared about this, you can YouTube a retina surgery. I had multiple incisions into my eyeball while being awake. So I don't recommend it. It was quite anxious of an hour for me. So, but all good. I can see now. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, very glad to see that you made it through. With pun intended, you are a sight for sore eyes, Randy. But listen, so here,
okay.
I was gonna open with that one. I should open with
All
it.
right, there you go.
Anyway, so glad you're back here and everything. I figured we touch base on a couple different topics here. First and foremost, so one of the things you had mentioned previously, and it was really it was baffling that this was happening, was that even after ransomware decryption and everything occurred, the insurance companies were still just saying like, all right, let's just pay the ransom anyways. So do you have any updates on that? Is that still going on?
Absolutely. We put significant effort on this. And this is something that I'm hopeful we have several different initiatives tackling this. Obviously, one of them is talking directly with insurances, talking to the lawyers that talk to the insurances, and talking to partners that have access to the insurances. I think I mentioned last time that some of the IR firms, especially in Asia, they've had some challenges on insurance, and several of them started underwriting insurance. So essentially, they're the broker for insurance, cybersecurity insurance purposes, because it was just such a complex set of discussions. But I think we've had a number of different discussions on that front, and I look forward to tackling and overcoming that by the end of the year. I'm hopeful about that.
But yeah, it does just kind of show that the problems are a little more nuanced and require a lot more training and kind of bring everybody on board with the solutions here. It's not just
Right.
like, here's the solution and now everything's solved. You still have to spread the word and everything to people.
So the other thing that I was going to add is a lot of the clients, customers, end users used to think that, well, if my data is exfiltrated and the ransomware has it, they could actually release it on the internet. So a few of the law firms now have began educating their customers, letting them understand it doesn't matter if you pay the ransom. In 6 months, 8 months, almost 100% of the time, someone will come back and say, hey, I left this gang. I have your data. Last time you paid $3 million. This time around, if you don't pay $100,000, I'm going to release it over to the internet. And that happens every 6 to 8 months, 6 to 8 months, 6 to 8 months. In some eventuality, obviously the end customer does not continue paying that. That makes no sense. And so it doesn't, this is where the law firms are also educating the end customer, saying, hey, it's all about recovering your data and getting back to work. Whether as people find out now or in 6 months, they're going to find out.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's definitely the fact of the matter is they can hold that information against you for until the end of time.
Correct.
So there's no
Exactly right.
reason to pay them because they're not gonna have a change of heart and stop doing
Right.
what they're doing. So
Right.
and
They're going to need money at some point. Yes.
exactly. Yeah. So moving on from there too, we had talked previously of specific states kind of getting to the point where the governments are putting their foot down and saying
Right.
no more paying ransomware under any circumstances if it's government money in any way, shape, or form. And in that same vein, then Florida and Michigan have been getting targeted, you had said, from ransomware. Is that tied into it? Walk us through the story.
Yes, absolutely. I think the last time I was talking about this, Florida had set out and said anybody who takes Florida taxpayer money in any shape or form, doesn't actually have to be a local government entity, they would not be allowed to pay ransomware and not allowed to actually negotiate. Michigan has since also come on board on that. And so this is great because at some point, obviously, well, if you're not going to pay the ransomware, we've talked about this many times, it's just like a regular ransom. You talk about not paying the ransom, until your kid is the one being ransomed, right? At that point, it changes. So at some point, you do need to get your data back and get back into business. And this is where we come in. This is where the missing gap. One of the CIOs of one of the states actually said, we are the missing gap in their storyline. And so this is something that is advancing well. And at the same time, I think we put out a press release on higher ed. Again, not most of our customers do not allow us to put out press releases, but I think we can certainly talk about some of the wins that we've had in Florida. We talked about the wins that we had in higher ed. And so this is a good evolution, I think, overall in the market. I think we're certainly beginning to see more and more ransomwares of different kinds targeting what used to not get targeted. There used to kind of be a notion of, okay, if it's a hospital, we're not going to target that. A higher ed, we're not going to target that. We're just going to target, higher in enterprises, et cetera. That's kind of out the window. Everybody's targeted now. So.
Yeah. Goes back to that idea that no real honor amongst thieves.
No.
At that point, eventually it all breaks down, and daddy always needs a new pair of shoes eventually. So that's everything goes out the window. And in that same vein, so as Florida and now Michigan has now kind of went down this route, do you see more states going down this route, especially because now there are real solutions on the table?
Yes, I think like many things, when somebody comes up with a solution or a method of approaching a problem and it works for them, then everybody else, it's kind of everybody else. We expect everybody else to start adapting to that. Right? So that's I think it's got to work well to a certain extent until there's a very specific set of services that cannot be turned off, right? Something that's a state or a business or a school or hospital absolutely needs. I still expect them to, in some way, shape, or form, negotiate with the state and say, okay, we're still going to pay those. But I think there's just not going to be, the majority of them, they're not going to be allowed to be paid. And they're going to have to come up with, coming back to with their business data. How are you going to restore everything to continue doing what you were supposed to do?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm kind of curious to see how much consensus we reach over even just the United States, not even talking about other countries and how they might go along this route as well. But last but not least, in terms of ransomware, you had said to me that there's been some developments in terms of the actual ransomwares themselves. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think the last few times we talked about the technology of ransomware, it got to the point where you essentially have gangs, their master gangs, essentially putting out a service. It's ransomware as a service. And everybody, you got thousands and thousands of essentially resellers of ransomware going out, subscribing to the service and creating their own customized configuration of the ransomware. We've seen since then a even bigger development than that. Now we're beginning to see a ransomware targeting a customer from one of the resellers that we don't see that ransomware, that whatever you want to call it, the engine of it or the family of it. It's one of one. And that makes sense. I mean, if you think about this, right, a ransomware can bring in $3 to $5 million on a per case basis. And if you use the same engine for 2 or 3 of them, even one of them pays more than pays for itself. Yeah. And so beforehand, you had kind of lacking in know-how of creating ransomwares and how to handle those. Nowadays, that's kind of, there's enough money that went into ransomware the last few years that they can hire engineers and they can now create a unique ransomware in its entirety for a customer. And so how that plays for us is, they are becoming more and more successful at evading your Windows Defenders, your EDRs, et cetera. But at the same time, because they're trying to modify everything, including the encryption, that this is actually working to our advantage, because the more you steer off from standard-based encryption, the easier it is for us to do what we do. And the reason why they would steer off again from standard-based encryption is because the EDRs and other systems that are trying to prevent them from attacking them is now becoming more and more adept at detecting, hey, why are you doing encryption? You're just really not something that should be doing encryption. Why are you doing encryption in this case? And so a lot of the EDRs actually detect when a ransomware is using standard-based encryption, and that's why ransomware needs to steer off from it. And so this is something that we're beginning to see more and more complexity and essentially a quality of software. Actually, the software quality of the ransomware is actually going way up. And in that particular case, it actually makes our life easier.
That's interesting. So the traditional cybersecurity game is playing the very traditional cat and mouse with ransomware, and ransomware is now evolving again. It just so happens that Nubeva is in a very good position to take advantage of that, as you guys are completely unaffected, or even benefiting from the fact that they're now going down these rogue routes, so to speak.
Exactly.
Interesting. All right, Randy. Well, listen, it was
Okay.
great catching up with you again. Is there anything else you want to add about updates with Nubeva or anything before we go today?
No, that's it. Apologize for not doing a lot of my videos. Just hard to do one looking like a pirate, I suppose. The other thing I was going to mention is I got a new wallpaper. The Warriors are doing well. Real Madrid doing well. It's fantastic. Season just starting. So,
Fantastic. Well, Randy,
all
thank
right.
you again so much for coming on. It's great seeing you again. Let us know if you have any questions, anybody. We will dive into them. For now, stay tuned for another update coming soon. And Randy, have a wonderful day.
Great. Thank you.